Well, y'all found out I was going to give a presentation when I did, so obviously I'm not prepared. But one thing is for sure, I could, if I were to prepare a presentation, I couldn't compete with Jennifer and her slides, but I guarantee you I could outcompete Rob in his regulatory slides, okay? So
you have more of them?
Well, I'd have plenty of them, okay? But really what I want to do, I do welcome the opportunity to kind of get up here and educate some people on what our mission is and where our role is in this thing, because I've found that there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. And first off, the Corps of Engineers, I'm Lloyd Mullins, supervisor for the local office regulatory of the Corps of Engineers, okay? Kind of been in the business a while. I was with the GLO for 25 years before I assumed this role, so I've kind of seen the way it's handled on both sides. But anyway, the Corps does have regulatory authority in the area, depending upon what's done and where it's done. We have regulatory authority under both the Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. So what that means is that anything that's done below the mean high tide line, we regulate both the excavation and the placement of fill material in that area, okay? Anything between the mean high tide line and what we call the annual high tide line on the beach, which is in essence the highest tide that gets there in the spring of the year, okay, which we estimate to be somewhere within probably 20 to 40 feet of the base of the dunes in many areas. That falls into the Clean Water Act, and what we regulate there is the placement of fill material in that zone. So now what does that mean? Well, what that means is that somebody can go out. We do not regulate the removal of debris, okay? But what it means is somebody can go out and clean sargassum off the beach and debris off the beach, and they don't need a permit from us, okay? Somebody can even go above the mean high tide line and remove sand with the debris, and they don't need a permit from us. Where they do need a permit from us for is whenever they start moving that sand around on the beach or they place more sand back on the beach, okay, between that zone. So just to be sure everybody understands. Now, some of the practices that the City of Corpus is now doing, City of Port Aransas is now doing, what we've seen is that they've been moving sand and debris off the beach and they've been placing it in non-jurisdictional areas. They don't need a permit for that. They do need a permit if they're going to be moving sand around on the beach. They use a maintainer to windrow sand, or they trench areas to put sargassum in and then cover that back over. That's something that we regulate. There needs to be a permit in order to do that. Right now, we are processing 2 permits, one from the City of Port Aransas, one from the City of Corpus Christi, to do different types of beach maintenance operations that would involve one of our permits. We've issued 2 permits in the past for work like this, one to the City of Galveston and one to the City of South Padre Island, to do different types of placement of sand material on the beach. So, we've got a little history of this. One thing I do want to point out today is that we're in the process of developing what we call a regional general permit. It hadn't gone out on public notice yet, but the idea here is to develop a permit that would cover the entire coast of the state of Texas if possible, knowing that one size may not fit all, but there can be conditions placed into the general permit. And what my personal opinion is that this is really not a federal Corps of Engineers issue. This is really a state and local government issue. And what we'd like to do is we hope at some point in the future, this regional general permit, if it's ever developed, the GLO or some other state entity, logically the GLO, would want to administer it. The GLO currently administers one other regional general permit we have, and we're negotiating with them on 2 more. So it's not a stretch to do that. Okay, what it would mean is that some agency, GLO possibly, could then take the general permit, and then as governmental entities, go to them. If it meets the terms and conditions of the general permit, they would then just issue it administratively. Okay, then they would notify us. Now, obviously, there are primarily endangered species issues involved, and one of the permit actions that we have right now, the City of Corpus permit action, we're going through formal consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service, because I think there's 13 species, threatened endangered species, that are of concern here, mainly turtles, several species of turtles, and the piping plover. So we're going through the process with the Fish and Wildlife Service to consult on that. We anticipate the same thing will happen on the permit action we have with the City of Port Aransas. Okay, judging from maybe what one of the presentations was yesterday, maybe one of the other local governments needs to get a permit for what they're doing. Okay, we'll have to follow up on that. But what this regional general permit would do is it would allow all that to be done one time and not each and every time. Okay, so we would come up with a consultation process, hopefully, and it would be part of the terms and conditions of the regional general permit. We would hope that that would be administered by someone, maybe like the GLO, okay, and then it would simplify the whole process and still keep it within what we consider to be a local government type of issue. Okay, within a nutshell, that's basically all I thought I'd talk about. John, is there anything else that we should mention?
Questions on you?
Yes, sir.
I think the city of Corpus Christi is applying for a permit to trench and bury the seaweed.
That's correct.
That sounds like that's a recipe for quicksand.
I don't, what we do is we put it out on public notice. We get comments in. We've gotten comments from a number of individuals like Johnny, Dr. Watson, Dr. Amos, people like that can comment. State and local governments can comment. State and federal agencies, can comment. And we haven't gotten a comment on that permit action that would address that concern at this point in time. That does not mean that we can't consider it as an issue.
Well, I mean, if you keep doing this on a repetitive basis, it's building a ball. So it doesn't make much sense to issue a permit for that kind of activity.
Well, the question when we issue a permit is the action within the public interest, okay? And there can be negative things that can go along with a permit decision, but it has to overall be within the public interest. In response to your concern, we didn't get a comment about that, so I'm not sure what the degree of concern would be, to be honest with you.
Okay, I'm just amazed that it's overlooked. I mean, it sounds
Typically, you trench right at the water's edge, and you can't have a vehicle within 50 feet. So really, it's just human impacting it. So I've walked over the stuff for years, and I've never died. So
that's automatic law enforcement.
Well,
Darwinian.
that water line varies. So what you think is the potential for the guy coming down from San Antonio with his family and losing his front end of his car in the bog? That's not going to happen?
Well, I've seen cars out in the surf before, too. I mean, people do strange things. Johnny?
Would you explain to them that what the permit application is for? It's not just for the burial of weeds. There's a lot of other things involved in this so-called holistic beach grooming thing. What other activities are going to be regulated by that permit?
I'm not sure I follow you, John.
Well, for example, this isn't just about moving seaweed. It's moving sand.
Well, that's what I tried to say. We don't regulate debris removal.
Right, and sometimes the sand is sand that's been removed from roadways and is placed out there below the mean high tide line. Sometimes it's for events
I think your point is that this is more than just sargassum removal.
Yes.
The regional general permit would include a whole host of other activities which would involve, maybe nourishing the beach due to, at access road points or something like that.
Like when they have the beach to bay activities.
Right, berming of the area.
Out and builds berms. Those berms are within your area of authority.
Right. Anything that would be below the annual high tide line on the beach, if you're going to move sand around or place sand material there needs to be a permit issued for that. Yes, ma'am.
So, in my hypothetical, picking up the sargassum and shaking it, and then taking it and making tea and finding sand in the bottom of the water, bringing it back, that would be your permit?
What we would, in my opinion, what we'd regulate there is if you were to pick the seaweed up and shake it in place, that would not be relocation of sand on the beach, which the Clean Water Act, regulates.
De minimis.
Yeah, de minimis fill. Okay, and what you would do though is if you relocated the sand, you windrowed it, the sargassum and all the sand and windrow, and then shook it and put it back. That's different. That would be the placement of fill material.
Well, like I know, when I'm out on the beach and I go get in my car and go home, I'm carrying a lot of sand with me on my feet, and
Right.
So I kind of assume that no matter what I did, if I pick up the sargassum and tote it off to compost it, there's going to be sand in there, and I'm just wanting to bring it back.
If you bring it back in something that would be equivalent to dump truck loads, you would need a permit.
Okay.
anybody else for Lloyd? Thank you, Lloyd.
Well, I'm not tarred and feathered after all. So.